What's up, guys? Levi here. So, I just wanted to talk about the Halloween franchise, and what I was going to do today was just rank all the films from worst to best. So, there are 13 films in the franchise. I've seen all of them many, many times. So, number 13, we have Halloween 5. Now, Halloween 5 to me is always the film that when I watch the entire franchise, that's the one film I'm least looking forward to. To me, it was just a very poorly made film. You had the ending of Halloween 4, which had Jamie just attack her mother and Dr. Loomis screaming no, and then it just ends with Jamie holding the bloody scissors with the clown costume on. And I just feel like where they went with it was just very unsatisfying. It's as if they'd set up Jamie to be like the next big bad of the franchise, and come the next film, they've kind of gone back on that decision a little bit. Some of the reasons that I do not like this film at all is because I think that the Myers mask is really bad. It was as if they saw how bad the mask in 4 was, and the makers of 5 just said, hold my beer. Now, I know back in like those days it was a bit more difficult to recreate masks the way that we can do now, but at the same time, surely it wasn't that difficult to get some sort of mold that you could make a mask off of, make it as close to the original one as possible, and then just go from there. Yeah, the mask overall was just horrible, and it just kind of made Michael look a little bit kind of like goofy during the film. Again, in talking about 4 setting things up for 5, you had Rachel be set up as, the survivor, one of the final girls, only for her to die like very early into the film. And essentially she just gets stabbed like in the shoulder, like, and she's just dead, which again is another problem that I have with this film, is that some of the kills in this film were a little bit underwhelming. I did like the kill where he kills Tina's boyfriend, Michael. Yeah, I thought that was pretty cool. I think that they could have, potentially shown a little bit more of the kill in the barn where he had the scythe, but it just is what it is at this point. But the thing that kind of pissed me off the most about killing off Rachel, like very early into the film, was that she was essentially replaced by Tina, which I know Tina's a bit of a well-hated character in the franchise, and I can definitely see why, because she was very annoying. You had all this stuff kicking off. Jamie has had one of her episodes where she sees Tina with Michael. And then the cops go to get Tina, the rescuer. She comes back, and then Jamie says like her first word in, God knows how long. And the next thing you know, Tina's just like, all right, cool. Well, I'm going to go party now. She's like, even despite Jamie's and Loomis's pleas for her to not go. And then we get to the car sequence where Michael's chasing Jamie and her friend through, the field in a car. And then Tina ends up dying as well. And again, she just gets stabbed in the shoulder. Well, sorry, every time I watch this film and I see Rachel and Tina die, I just say to myself, they were stabbed in the fucking shoulder. Like, sure, you could potentially bleed out from that, but like it's not as like effective as like being stabbed in the chest or in the stomach or anywhere else. And then we had the ending sequence. Now, one thing that I will praise this film for was that I thought the sequence where Jamie was stuck in the laundry chute, I thought that was really good. I thought that was very tense. I think I heard somewhere that she almost got injured doing that, or she might have actually got injured doing that. So, props to Danielle Harris for doing that. And then we just had this kind of mid-ending. Loomis incapacitates Michael, and then Loomis then has like a heart attack and ends up falling on Michael. And then the next thing you know, they're in the police station, and the Man in Black's come along, basically taking out all the police officers, and Michael and Jamie are gone now. It was just very underwhelming. You know, upon like rewatches, it just feels very much a film that's like trying to set up the next film instead of like just trying to contain itself into like one project. Like you've gone from having all this hype around the ending of Halloween 4 to completely fucking Halloween 5 so that you could set up the next film, which, you know, not a lot of people really enjoyed. Now, I know that some people enjoyed 5. I know some people can have fun with it. You know, that's great for them. But for me, it's just one of those films where when it comes to watching 5, it feels more like a chore than it is watching something because I enjoy it. So coming in at number 12, we have Rob Zombie's Halloween 2, which obviously is one of the more hated films of the franchise, and for good reason. What I will give Rob Zombie props for is for not following the complete same storyline as the original Halloween 2. I like that they kept it sort of in the beginning of the film. The only criticism I would give that is that they could have probably given it a little bit more time. But seeing Laurie's trauma from the whole situation, you know, it was a nice fresh take on that, because at the time we only really had Laurie's trauma from H2O. So it's nice to see that sort of take on it. So you've got a younger Laurie trying to deal with it and process everything. But where this film really falls short for me is it's just very much the same sort of, you know, very redneck kind of bit too crass take on it, which was one of my problems with the previous installment of Rob Zombie's Halloween. You know, it was interesting for his take to see what Michael actually does when he's not in Haddonfield, just, you know, slaughtering people. But at the same time, they kind of fucked Michael in that film as well. Like, for a lot of Halloween fans, the mask is very sacred. So to have Michael spend like a lot of Halloween 2 just walking around without this mask on, it was just very jarring to see, you know, when you've had what, like 10 films at this point. Sorry, nine other films at this point. And what they did with Loomis as well in that film, like that just didn't sit well. They kind of made Loomis look like the hero of the first film, and then in the second film he just went balls to the wall heel turn Loomis, where he was just an asshole for the entire film up until like the very end, which he was all of a sudden good again, and then he just ended up getting absolutely slaughtered for it. Now, I do like Malcolm McDowell as an actor. I think he's really good, and I think he did well with the job that he was given for Halloween 2. However, I just feel like that this Loomis was just a complete left turn of what fans, you know, love and care about the character. You know, the one line from Loomis that always sticks for me from that film is the, like, when I want your opinion, I'll beat it out of you. Like, that's not Loomis. Like, Donald Pleasance's Dr. Loomis would have never said that about anyone. Like, and even his Loomis was a bit batshit at times. The one thing that I will give is that Brad Dourif's portrayal of Sheriff Brackett was probably the highlight of the film. You know, you've got this father who almost lost his daughter and has taken in Laurie as well, and he's trying to be protective of them. When he finds out that Michael might be returning to Haddonfield, he's again just very protective over Danielle Harris's Annie. He was very protective over her. And when they got to the scene where he came home and he was just trying to find Annie, that acting was probably some of the best acting in Rob Zombie's Halloween films overall. Like, you could just feel the pain that his character was going through, and it really does say a lot about how good of an actor Brad Dourif really is. But the one thing that really makes this film stick out like a sore thumb, and I know a lot of people will agree with this, is the whole White Horse bullshit. If you took the whole White Horse stuff out of the film, I think the film would be a little bit better. I get it might have been like a bit of an artistic choice by Rob Zombie, maybe it was studio involvement. I'm more leaning to the Rob Zombie decision though, because he's got to get Sherry in his films. But it just felt, it made the film felt very disjointed. The one thing that I will give, and probably one of my other favorite scenes from the film, is when Laurie's having that nightmare and then she ends up trapped in this coffin. Like, that was very eerie. And that's another one of the scenes that kind of sticks with me whenever I think about Halloween 2. But the ending of Halloween 2 as well, it was just very eh. You have Loomis essentially killed off after his character was essentially fucked through the entire film. You have Michael then killed off, and then Laurie comes out wearing the mask, and everyone's shocked, and then it shows Laurie in psychiatric, and then you have again another white horse scene. It was just very eh. But yeah, overall, Halloween 2, number 12. Coming in at number 11, we have Halloween Resurrection. This is probably one of the most divisive films other than Rob Zombie's Halloween 2. So Halloween Resurrection, for me, the main problem was it was a sequel that just didn't need to happen. Obviously, because of the deal that was made when Jamie Lee signed on as Laurie Strode, being that, Laurie Strode can never kill Michael, that was just kind of a bullshit deal, to be honest. But having Laurie Strode just killed off in the way she was, like in the first 10 minutes of the film, it felt very disjointed from the way her character was in H2O. So yeah, we have all this happen, and then it's all dangertainment, which the idea of going into the house of a notorious serial killer, like, it's been done before, especially like nowadays where you see how many ghost hunts and things like that on the internet of people going into houses where like particular people have died. So I don't necessarily have a problem with that. I just felt like it tried to make the franchise very meta. And again, it was just so left field. It was just a bunch of teens doing stupid shit in a house of a serial killer who was still alive. What could go wrong? But the acting overall, it was just a bit cheesy. And Busta Rhymes, whether you love or hate his character, I personally loved his character. I just thought he was so funny. Just seeing him try to go toe to toe with Michael Myers, pulling out like these kung fu moves. Plus, he does make one of the most referenced lines in the whole franchise, being "trick or treat, motherfucker." Now, I have seen both versions of the ending. Personally, I preferred the other version where the FBI are in and, somebody gets grabbed and then the screen goes to black. I think it's more of a mysterious ending than the one we actually got where Michael was burned to a crisp and, he was taken to the morgue and then he was taken to the morgue and then his eyes just opened when they were trying to do the autopsy on him and you could hear him like screaming as well under the mask, which again, like, Michael should be a silent killer. Like, no matter what pain he's endured, like, he shouldn't be screaming at all like that as anyway. But yeah, that's Halloween Resurrection. That's my thoughts on it. Um, on a personal note, I can have fun with this film and how ridiculous it is. Just like in Friday the 13th, I know that Jason Takes Manhattan is notoriously bad, but I can still have a lot of fun with it and just sort of laugh along with it. It's kind of the same with this one. I can just sort of have a laugh with it, have some fun, just not take the film seriously at all. So coming in at number 6 is Halloween 6. Now, Halloween 6 I know is a very divisive film as well. I didn't think the film was too bad. There are problems with it, obviously, but I really felt like they tried to make Michael a lot more like the Michael that was in those first couple of films, more of like the stalker type. Now, I won't lie, I think that what Michael did to Jamie in between 5 and 6, which resulted in a baby being made, was a little bit messed up. But this whole Cult of Thorn thing, it was just done so badly. I don't know if there was any way you could have actually done it any better either, because Michael's one of those beings that shouldn't have anybody pulling the strings or anything like that. Like, he is evil personified. But the characters that you had living in the Strode house, they did fine. And then you had Paul Rudd play Tommy Doyle, which was one of his first acting appearances. Which, to say that was one of his first acting appearances, I think he played the, kind of messed up character really well. Like, because he was clearly messed up from what happened to him all those years ago in 1978. And then you had Donald Pleasant's last appearance as Loomis, which for me was the highlight of the film. I know he wasn't in the film very long, but what he managed to do in the film, I think, was done very well. When you watch the films as well, like binge watch them, when you see how different Loomis looks in 5 and 6, it is kind of sad to see like how old he'd really gotten and everything. But then you have the whole Man in Black reveal, which I kind of saw it coming when I first watched it. I knew that Wynn was just going to be the Man in Black. And then there was just the whole sequence in Smith's Grove, which for me was probably the highlight of the film. Just seeing Michael go absolute ape shit on all the people that were there, and he was chasing down Tommy and Kara. The sequence in that like little experiment room, I think, was another good done sequence. They tried to sort of bait and switch by giving Michael the baby, but it turns out it wasn't the baby. And then when Danny was being targeted by Michael, I think his action was like really genuine. Like, I think that is the sort of reaction that any kid would get if Michael Myers was coming for them. So I did like that. And then just seeing Tommy beat the absolute crap out of Michael to the point where he was using like loads of green stuff was an interesting choice. But I get that they needed to, get an end to the film, get a way for them to escape. And then the whole ending of it where Loomis can be heard screaming and Michael's mask is on the floor. It left a lot to be desired, but considering what happened in real life, I can understand why they went with the decision. The thing with Halloween 6 as well is that there's two different cuts of the film. So in the other cut, it has Jamie in it a little bit longer, but she still ends up getting killed. And then you have a bit of a different sequence in the Smith's Grove where Tommy lays out the runes and has Michael trapped. And then you have Wynn sort of coming along, talking to Michael. And the next thing you know, Loomis comes along, unmasks Michael, it's Wynn. And then he's like, oh, you're in charge now. And then you see the mark of Thorn appear on Loomis, which is when he starts screaming. I would have much rather had that ending if Donald Pleasance could have been in another film, but for obvious reasons, it couldn't happen. But I think the fact as well that there are like two different cuts, which both have their positives and both have their like negatives, it just kind of makes for a bit of a difficult watch when you watch one or the other. If somebody can make a cut of both of them where it has all the best bits, I wouldn't complain. So coming in at number 9, we've got Rob Zombie's Halloween. Now, again, another divisive film. A lot of these films in this franchise are divisive, but I quite liked it. I liked that they tried to do something a little bit different. I think it was interesting that they showed Michael being in Smith's Grove, sort of from, a child into adulthood. And I like that it showed the connection that Loomis and Michael were making at like such a young age. I just think it made the whole rivalry that they would then end up having just that little bit more personal. But seeing Michael do his first kills and everything was very interesting. And, when you compare this film to the 1978 version, the 1978 one just clears it. But I do like some of the ideas that Rob Zombie brought to the table. I think that the whole sequence of Michael killing his sister, I think everything around that was well done. I think it really suited the style that the film was going for. I like that they showed the escape as well. I think that was well done. It definitely showed like how big and dominant Michael really was. And then you had the whole sequence of Joe Grizzly, which it was okay. I mean, I can see what Rob Zombie was going for, but I just didn't think that really suited the whole film. And then you eventually had Michael return to Haddonfield, and this is where essentially the whole remake of the first film then comes in, which they managed to really cram down into, a little less time. But overall, I think that when it got to the whole remake portion, I think it was well done. I think they did things a little bit differently, which again, if you're just gonna do a shot for shot remake of the first film, it's just like, what's the point of doing it then? I did like that Annie ended up surviving as well. I thought that was a nice touch, just so that it wasn't just a sole survivor situation. And then we got to the Myers house when Michael was chasing after Laurie, and it just kind of felt like they spent a little bit too much time of like nothing, where Michael's just sort of like walking around the house looking for her. But then we got to the whole ending of it, and after Laurie shot Michael in like the face or wherever it was, and you could just see her covered in blood screaming and everything like that. I think that was a very like haunting ending. But I liked Malcolm McDowell's portrayal of Loomis in this one. He really did well. I think he really did justice as well. Because the thing with Dr. Loomis is we're so connected to having Donald Pleasance as him that it was always going to be a task for whoever was going to take up that role to kind of fill those shoes. But I think that Malcolm McDowell did it really well. It's just a shame what happened to him in the next film. Again, I liked Brad Dourif for Sheriff Brackett. I thought that he was. I think overall, in between these two films, I think Sheriff Brackett really held it all together. He was by far the best character of those two films. But just seeing like a bit more of a bigger, more brutal Michael Myers as well was something that I was quite satisfied with, because as much fun as it is to see like the stock side of Michael, I always just wanted to see the more beast mode side of Michael Myers, the one that's just like he just doesn't give a fuck and just will do anything. But yeah, overall that's Halloween Rob Zombie. Coming in at number 8, we have Halloween 4. So this film I know is regarded as quite a good film amongst the fan base. For me, it's a little bit more of a mixed film. I think the look of Michael was a little bit weird. You know, you had the mask, which was horrible, looked very derpy at times, and then you had him like essentially looking like he was wearing shoulder pads to make himself look bigger. I do appreciate they tried to keep the whole stalking aspect of the first couple of films in there, but for me, it just didn't hit as well. And Jamie did well enough, and you know Rachel was a good enough character as well, but sort of everything around that for me was just a little bit eh. Yeah, I like the sequence in the Mika house, like when Mika's daughter finds out that the officer that was left to stay guard had been incapacitated, and then the whole Michael stalking Rachel and Jamie through the Mika house. I think that was pretty good. I think that was well done. And then we had a first look at mob mentality in the Halloween franchise with part 4, where you had a bunch of people that were kind of annoyed that they couldn't stay out drinking, so they decided to go hunt down Michael Myers. Ended up killing somebody by accident. Where have we seen this before? And then they all just ended up getting taken out anyway. The ending sequence was probably one of my more favorite ones of the franchise. I did like even though Michael had done some horrible things, Jamie still felt this like kind of connection with him. And then he ends up just getting, shot like a bunch of times and then ends up falling down like this mine shaft. Which, when I first watched that film, I was just like, if he's been burned alive, this sure as shit isn't gonna stop him. But then the one thing from this film that always sticks out with me and always gives me goosebumps when we're watching is just seeing Jamie be consumed by this evil that Michael was back when he was a little kid. And just hearing that scream, the goosebumps are there. And then you just see Loomis run up the stairs and just start screaming, no. And you just see Jamie stood there with the scissors and wearing the clown costume. That was one of the best endings of the franchise. It's just a shame that the next film kind of fucked things up with that. Next up, we've got Halloween H2O at number 7. So this film for me was always one of the better films. I know that in recent years the film started to get like a little bit more hate, but I liked it for what it was. I think that they kind of leaned a bit too much into the whole Scream aspect of things, but when you consider it was made by the same production company, you can kind of understand why. But the first glimpse of Laurie sort of having to deal with all the trauma, I think, was really interesting. You had a as a bit of a drinker, very overprotective, very overbearing. You had John as her son, played by Josh Hartnett, who I think did really well for the role. His hairstyle was definitely a choice, I'm not gonna lie, but overall, I feel like this film is kind of fun. The whole beginning sequence where you have, one of the first acting appearances from Joseph Gordon-Levitt, I thought was really cool. Seeing Marion be targeted by Michael after all these years because she was looking after Loomis close to his unfortunate passing. It made for a very good opening. Then we end up in the whole school portion of the film, which was okay. Seeing Laurie having to deal with her trauma again was a very interesting thing. Obviously, I've said already that she was a little bit of a drinker. She'd sometimes see Michael and have to like close her eyes and just sort of say to herself like he's not actually there. And then we do get to the bit where Michael gets into the school and Laurie sees him walking down towards her and he's trying to close her eyes and it just doesn't work. You have LL Cool J's character, which for me was probably one of the best parts of the film. Just this security guard trying to be an aspiring like erotic writer. You could tell that he was one of the more cool characters as well. He lets John and his friend leave the school grounds to go and get some stuff from town. But the highlight of this film was definitely Laurie deciding that she's just got to fight him once and for all. And when she ends up getting the axe and then just walks up and just screams Michael, like, that is probably one of the best scenes in the franchise. It just shows Laurie's just done with this shit at this point. She just wants to end it. And it was good to see a bit more of a confrontational Laurie as well, the one that's going to go and fight Michael herself. And then you've got the ending of the film, which would have been one of the best endings if the sequel had never happened, where you have Laurie essentially end Michael once and for all. Like, I just think that was so well done. They could have capped off this franchise with that, and then they could have just gone and done like spin-offs or remakes or whatnot then. But I like that they kind of like held hands for a bit, had that bit of familial connection, and then Laurie just swings for their head and you get the music playing, and instead of hearing Michael's breathing, you just hear Laurie's breathing. I just thought that was a perfect way to cap off the franchise. But unfortunately, overall, we got Resurrection, and then it just kind of went to shit from there, essentially. This film was definitely missing Dr. Loomis. Like, on first watch, I was just a bit like, when's Dr. Loomis going to come into this? Not realizing that he'd passed at this point. But I think that having Dr. Loomis in this film would have made it so much better. Like, they could have maybe introduced, like, the son of Loomis or something like that, who was investigating Marion's murder or just anything like that. But we got what we got. The one thing that I will say is that I read a bit of like an earlier draft of the film, and it had this sequence where there was this swimming pool like under the floor. You get the floor sort of like retract, and there's like a swimming pool underneath of it, and there was a kill sequence that took place in that. I would have liked if they'd have done that and added it to that film, but unfortunately it didn't happen. I still think it's one of the better films of the franchise, but I just think that the way that they handled Laurie's trauma in 2018 was just like a little bit better. Coming in number 6, we have Halloween 2, which is probably a bit of a hot take. It's probably a lot of people's top 3, but for me, I think that Halloween 2 is the number 6 film of this franchise. It was a very good film, and I like that they had the continuity of it happening all in the same night. That even though Michael had been shot and ended up falling off that balcony, he still wasn't done yet. He would still try and complete his mission of eventually getting to Laurie. I think the hospital setting for it was good as well. Especially like a hospital that just isn't busy at all, and like there's a lot of empty hallways, a lot of quiet in that building as well. For me, one of the better kills of that film was the hot tub scene where Michael's just dunking that nurse's face under like the boiling hot water, and like every time he pulls her face up you can just see like the skin start to peel. I thought that was a pretty cool kill. I did like that it had John Carpenter's fingerprints on it as well, because I do think that John Carpenter is one of like the best horror directors there is out there. But the film does have its problems. I think that the the portrayal of Michael just felt a little bit too robotic and zombie-like. He just walked way too slow. He was like, it was just very robotic. And the mask as well. I know that there was an issue with the mask being that it was under Deborah Hill's bed for a little bit of time and she was a heavy smoker, so it kind of discolored a little bit. And then fitting it over the new actor's head, kind of made the mask look a little bit wider. Overall, I did think that the film was good. I liked that even though Laurie had thought that it was all over, it wasn't, and then she again had to find another way out. My biggest criticism of this film, I have to say, is the whole brother sister storyline. I think that they could have definitely done without it, but I think it was just to try and add something a little bit fresh to the film, do something like a little bit different. But I think even John Carpenter, after the film had came out, he wasn't even a big fan of that decision either. I liked that we got, the small doses of crazy Loomis, running through the streets. I shot him 6 times. I can't wait to play the Halloween game and start saying that when I play as Loomis. But yeah, Loomis's portrayal was very good overall. He's still trying to convince Sheriff Brackett that, Michael's not gone yet. He's still out there. We need to be looking for him. And then just like the sequence at the end where Loomis kind of took over and had become like a little bit of a vigilante. He was supposed to be taken away by, some officers, but he ended up getting them to turn around and go back to Haddonfield so he could go to the hospital. And it just felt very much like at that point, Loomis came in charge, not this officer that was supposed to be taking him away. And then you had the final sequence in which they were trapped in this room and they were turning like all the gas on and trying to distract Michael long enough so that Laurie can make her escape and Loomis could make the sacrifice. When you watch Halloween 4 as well, it's kind of a little bit weird, like how's Loomis actually survived this? But I'm not going to complain because Loomis was definitely the best character of the following films from that. Overall, I did think that the film was a good film. I did have some issues with it, but it felt very much like a John Carpenter film. It felt very much like, one of the better spiritual successors to the original one. Coming in at number 5, again, it's probably going to be a bit of a hot take, but I've put Halloween 2018 there. Now, when I first went to see this film, I absolutely loved it. I thought it was a massive return to form for the franchise. It was good to see an older version of Laurie dealing with all this trauma, how it was affecting her family as well, because she had a daughter and a granddaughter as well. Seeing the older version of Michael as well, like especially when he'd escaped and just had that hunger to kill again, was definitely a highlight of the film. Like James Jude Courtney, for me, by far the best portrayal of Michael Myers. Especially when we got to the scene where, Michael's back in Haddonfield, everyone's trick-or-treating, and he's just like walking down the street, sort of scoping out victims, and just trying to find his way to wherever he wants to go. For me, where this film was a bit of a turn-off was the Sartain stuff. Like, I think he was essentially shoehorned in to be like this Dr. Loomis type of character, and then they decided to take like a real left field turn. You have Sartain betray Hawkins because he wants to see what would happen if he got Michael and Laurie into like the same room together, sort of thing. That to me was quite a turn off. I get that they needed a way for Michael to make his way to Laurie, but I think they could have done it in a better way. But I'd say one of the more cool kills of the film was when Michael had incapacitated Sartain, and then Sartain's looking up at him and says to him, "Say something," and then you just see Michael just stamp on his head and just like complete mush. My favorite kill of that film though was the 2 officers that were sort of keeping guard outside Laurie's house. You have the one officer that got killed by the penknife that Sartain had, and then you had the other officer who was essentially made into a jack-o'-lantern. So after watching that film, I watched Terrifier a few years later for the first time. And when in the pizza place where the guy comes back from cleaning the bathroom and he sees like this head that's just been like burnt up and looks like a bit like a jack-o'-lantern, I was just a bit like, oh shit, is this where they got the idea from? I mean, making a jack-o'-lantern is very like in theme with Michael, so I'll give him that. I did like that Laurie's house was a bit of a Home Alone house as well, so each room was its own sort of trap. I did like that she was going through room to room, sort of checking the room. No one's in there. Right, cool. I'm going to close this room off. I think that was definitely one of the smarter decisions made by a final girl. I think that the bait and switch that Karen did as well, when Michael had basically toppled over this kitchen counter, I think that was very well done as well, because it made you kind of doubt, like, oh, is Karen actually going to make it through this film? Is this why we're going to get another film? But when she was like, gotcha, and then just shot him in the neck, I was like, oh, that was awesome. I did like that it made Laurie a little bit more into the stalker instead of like the one being hunted, because you had all these Easter eggs in this film. So you had Allison look out the window and it was Laurie stood there, not Michael. And then you had Michael throw Laurie off the balcony, and then when he goes to look over the balcony, Laurie's not there anymore. And then you had, after Michael gets shot in the neck, you had Laurie sort of peek out, but the light was only on her face, which I thought was a really nice callback to the first film. Like, you could definitely tell that this film was made by fans of the franchise instead of, studio execs that were just going to be like, oh, this is what I think that the fans would actually like, instead of, overall, I think this film was a good film. A few years ago, this film would have been number 2, but in recent years, like, the problems with the film kind of got to me like a little bit more, which is why it's dropped down to number 5. Number 4, this is probably going to be the most hot take of the entire thing. Halloween Ends. Now, I'm one of those people. I'm a big Halloween Ends defender. I will defend that film. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. But for me, this film was actually a well-made film. It was well shot. It was well directed. I liked the introduction of Corey's character as well. I think Rowan Campbell did like an absolute amazing job of that. And I think the main criticism, which was something that a lot of people will agree with, is the fact that this shouldn't have been the ending of the trilogy. Now, they could have gone one or two ways about this. They could have introduced Corey in maybe 2018, and then you just have him getting bullied throughout 2018 and ends. Sorry, 2018 and kills. And then you have him turn completely and ends. Like, that would have probably made for a bit more of a cohesive storyline. I think as well, like, after what Halloween Kills set up, I think that for there to be like a time jump and then Laurie is just like, oh, everything's fine now. My daughter's only dead, but I'm going to go live in a house and be an actual grandma now. That was kind of a decision for me. But I like the fact that we saw like a bit more of a rough version of Michael, a little bit more of a weak version as well. Like, it was a very well done contrast from the absolute beast he was in Halloween Kills. But overall, I did enjoy the film for what it was. Now, was it the right time to do it? Absolutely not. Well, I think if they'd have done that film, maybe in a couple more years, as a bit of a spin-off, I think it would have been a little bit more well received. Now, I was worried when I heard the rumors that there was going to be a copycat Michael in the film, but I think what Rowan Campbell did with Corey, I think, was really well done. I think it really fits with the theme of, the whole evil taking shape, about how everyone's got some sort of evil in them, and how like the town became evil after Michael's reign of terror over it. I think that was well done. And I think that the soundtrack for that film as well, one of the best soundtracks that's been done for the franchise. But then we do eventually get to the whole ending thing where Michael and Laurie are finally fighting. That fight could have probably done with a few more minutes, but I did enjoy it for what it was. It was just very surreal seeing Michael actually fully defeated for once. Like, this whole branch of the timeline's over. Like, there's no sequels because Laurie's not allowed to kill Michael or anything like that. So I did enjoy that. The way that they took Michael out, like, permanently was very creative, but it was one of those things. I'm surprised it's not really been thought about before. But overall, I do have a lot of love for this film. It's one of the films that I do look forward to watching every year when I'm watching the Halloween franchise. Coming in at number 3, we have Halloween 3, probably another hot take, but for me, Halloween 3 is the film that I look forward to watching the most every year. Like, I know there's no Michael in it, but I did like the whole story with the masks and Silver Shamrock and everything, the whole androids as well. I like that there was a little bit of like an investigation into it as well, and they ended up in the town that they ended up in. I think that Colonel Cochrane was a very well done villain as well. Like, he was one of those very smart ones where, on the surface, he looks very, charming and very positive. But then behind the scenes, he's very much like a very evil and like wicked character who essentially wants to just kill the entire population of children. But I think the soundtrack for the film is really good. I think that if they'd have carried on making anthology films, I would have been okay with that. When there was rumors of there being a TV series, I did think to myself, if they could maybe do a bit of an anthology TV series instead to sort of make John Carpenter-esque stories, I think that would have worked very well. Give fans a bit of a breather from Michael Myers for a few more years. I think Tom Atkins' portrayal of Dr. Callis was very good as well. He was just very much an innocent bystander that just ended up somehow thrust into this whole mystery. Yeah, you had the whole twist ending where Ellie turned out to be an android and was trying to attack Dr. Callis. And you had the ending, which I think it kind of mirrored the beginning of the film very well, where you had Harry, the shop owner with a mask, running to the gas station. And then you had at the end of the film Dr. Callis running to the gas station to try and then stop the whole thing from happening. The ending very much kind of gave me a bit of a Invasion of the Body Snatchers vibe, where Dr. Callis was just like screaming down the phone, "Stop it, stop it, stop it." It very much reminded me of the original version of that film where you had the protagonist at the very end just sort of in the middle of the street trying to stop people and just like screaming maniacally and everything. But overall, I did think that Halloween 3 was a very good film. I know it's a bit of a divisive one because obviously there's no Michael in it. I was fine with it. I was fine that they did something like a little bit different. I think as well it's like a nice little breather as well in between parts 2 and 4 when you watch it all in order. You have Michael like burnt to a crisp at the end of 2, and then you watch this film about masks, and then you watch the next film. I think it's just like a nice little breather between those two films. Coming in at number 2, we have Halloween Kills. Now, I know that this film, again, was a bit of a divisive one, but for me, I had a lot of fun with it. I think it's one of the more fun films to watch. Now, for a very long time, I've wanted like a Halloween film where Michael Myers just goes absolute beast mode on everyone, and I think that this film did that very well. I think that the soundtrack to this film is tied with the soundtrack from the first film, just how good that soundtrack really was. It really set the tone for the film. It really set the fact that this isn't going to be a film about stalking. This isn't going to be a film where it's going to be like calculated and everything like that. No, Michael's just going to slash and hack through everything essentially. I think that the firefighter sequence was a very well done one. It definitely showed a bit more of a pissed off Michael Myers, like, because he was almost essentially burned alive. Seeing him just come out of that house of fire with the weapon in hand and just go after the firefighters, for me it was just very cool to watch, especially in the cinema, because I went to see this one in the cinema. A lot of people give the firefighter that was trying to spray water at Michael a little bit of grief, just being like, "What do you think that's going to do?" Do you know how powerful those fire hoses really are? Like, if somebody sprayed that at me, I'd be flying back. There'd probably be a fucking hole through me. But then, the one criticism I will give about this film, well, one of two anyway, was that Laurie was a little bit restricted because obviously she sustained wounds in 2018, so she was kind of like restricted to a hospital bed. There was a bit where she was out of bed and sort of like trying to fight and everything, but it ultimately didn't go well. I think it's a bit more of a realistic take, but we kind of watch these films to escape reality. So, and then the other criticism I will give the film is the whole Evil Dies Tonight stuff. If they'd have taken that stuff out of the film, it would have been pretty much the perfect Halloween film. But I get it. They were trying to do like a bit of social commentary on mob mentality. I think social commentary in a horror film though is best suited to Scream, which is like very meta and self-aware though. I think the sequences that took place in the Myers house, I think they were done really well, with Big John, Little John, and then the ending sequence between Allison and Cameron and Michael. Another thing that I do want to give the film credit for was the park sequence as well. where Lindsay found the kids in the park. She was asking them what they were doing, telling them that they need to go. And then Michael starts attacking the people in the car. And love it or hate it, but when the nurse with the Desert Eagle basically had the car door opened on her and she just flipped the gun back and shot herself, I laughed out loud at that. I thought that was hilarious. It kind of showed like how stupid people really were in that situation, which is why I think it was easy for Michael to kill as many people as he did that night. But yeah, the sequence that took place in the Myers house I thought was done really well. The Cameron death was pretty brutal. When Michael threw Allison down the stairs and she ended up breaking her leg, I was sat in the cinema thinking to myself, how are they gonna finish this story then if they're gonna do this all in one night? Yeah, then we had the whole mob scene at the end, which ultimately didn't go well. I did like the portrayal of Tommy in this film. I think Anthony Michael Hall did a good enough job with what he was given. I just think that the character overall was written pretty bad. It makes you wonder because they did try to get Paul Rudd back as Tommy Doyle for this film. So if they got him back, would they have made him like a little bit different? I would have liked it if Paul Rudd's version of Tommy Doyle came back for this film, and he was very much like the Loomis character. Trying to continue on Loomis's work. But then Tommy's death was pretty brutal as well. Like especially if you watch the extended cut where it shows that the bat's just been like absolutely smashed up, so he's just using a shard of it to finish Tommy off. I liked the speech as well that Laurie gave in the hospital about how every time Michael kills, he gets even stronger, more invulnerable. Yeah, because they kind of flip flopped in between: is Michael actually supernatural, or is he just a man that's just trying to kill people? And I like that it definitely put to bed the whole Michael isn't actually targeting Laurie sort of thing. And then the absolute ending sequence where Karen's in the Myers house because she's seen like the little kid ghost of Michael, and then she ends up getting killed by Michael. I don't know if anybody else really caught it, but to me that very much felt like a bit of an homage to Psycho, the shower scene. Just the way that she screams and like it's just continuous like slashes and everything. And then you just see Karen like on the floor, sort of like looking at the camera. But yeah, overall, I thought that Halloween Kills was a very good film. It was a very good sequel. It's one of the more enjoyable ones for me to watch. So that's number two. And then number one, of course, is the original 1978 version. I mean, what is there to be said about this film? The tension, the stalking, the timing of the film was just impeccable. I think that a lot of the horror films that came out after it, like especially the slasher ones, definitely took inspiration from it. Like without Halloween, you wouldn't have got Friday the 13th, which was essentially made to, kind of copy Halloween, but just kind of make it a bit different. I liked that Michael was just this very silent killer, that there was this whole theme of, Michael could be anybody. And they especially tried to make that a bit of a theme at the end when Michael's been essentially taken out, but then he's gone, and then you just see like all of these different shots throughout the film, and just hear Michael's breathing over it. Like, this could be anybody. Like, evil can be anywhere. It was a good introduction as well to Laurie Strode. Just being like this normal teenage girl who ends up then having to kind of like fight back and just trying to survive the entire ordeal. But the soundtrack as well, it's very iconic, especially when you get the Loomis speeches over it, because Loomis as well was one of the best parts of that film. But I just liked how it made Laurie look very much like a normal teenager when all this stuff is going on around her, and then she ends up finding, her friends all dead, and then it's Laurie gone into survival mode essentially. You're like, she's not fighting back, but she's just trying to survive the night. But you've got your iconic sequences as well from the film. So, Michael dressed as Bob, dressed as the ghost. You've got Linda's body being found on the bed with the Judith Myers tombstone above her. Well, you've got the sequence where Laurie's just found all that. She's backed out of the room, and then in like a dark room behind her, you could just see Michael's face slowly coming out. Like, again, that was an iconic shot from the film. And then you've got the cupboard sequence where Michael's trying to bash through this cupboard, trying to get to Laurie. Again, like this film just had so many iconic sequences and just so many referenced lines and stuff from it. And like I said, I think just the overall story, Michael Myers is just more of an idea. Like, Michael Myers could be anybody, Michael Myers could be anywhere. I just think was a very good theme for the film. And I think that the film overall is probably one of the best horror films of all time. But yeah, that's my entire ranking of the Halloween series. Let me know what your thoughts are, how you'd rank them any differently. And yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.